Survive the podcast or become a part of it. Which podcast is that? Why, it's America's most nightly podcast, The Pod People. I'm the Glore Witch, Matisse Van Rossum.
And after all, you're my water wall. I'm Ben Sheets.
Maybe one of the only good jokes in the movie.
Yeah. One of maybe two.
Yeah, Cleveland unfortunately can't join us this week. It's awfully convenient that he seems to always miss the episodes where we're talking about some doo-doo from a butt. But, thus is our duty to our patrons, to our podcast listeners, to keep people up to date with the current landscape of horror. And this one has gotten me feeling pessimistic.
Sometimes we just gotta dive headfirst into the slop mines.
We just got back from seeing Until Dawn, which was, as expected, not a good movie. I think this will still be an interesting discussion because I do think that I'm kind of fascinated, like, how this incarnation of this movie got made. And I think there's some interesting stuff to discuss there, even though the movie itself is pretty dog shit.
Yeah, I mean, on the base level, the movie itself is one of the worst of the year. I don't think we're in disagreement there.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No,
I think there's inherent challenges, right, to adapting a video game into a movie, especially a video game so focused on player agency and making choices that affect the story, right?
yes. So yeah, let's give that's a good place to start. Let's give a little bit of background. So as you mentioned, this is an adaptation of a video game from 2015 of the same title that was produced by or developed by Supermassive Games as the first of kind of a series that they've done. They're called like Dark Pictures or something like that.
Dark Pictures anthology. Yeah.
Dark Pictures anthology, yes. Effectively, they are choose your own adventure horror movies. Very cinematic, highly detailed mocap kind of stuff where playing out a sort of typical horror movie scenario, and you as the player get to make choices that influence various outcomes in the game. I remember when this first came out, they touted it as having something like 256 different endings, which is not really the case. It kind of hyperbolized that. Like, basically, there's like 8 characters or something, and over the course of the game, any of those 8 characters can live or die based on your choices. So by the end of the game, all of those 8 characters could be alive, none of those 8 characters could be alive, or any combination. So that's sort of where they're inflating the, like, 200 something endings, when really it's just like very slight variations of, like, 5 or 6.
And the fun of the game is snap decision making. Like, you get a limited amount of time to make very
Yes.
important decisions.
Life or death decisions.
And it also has lots of quick time events, which are always fun to intentionally fail. I think of the sequence from Heavy Rain, I think it is, where you can continually fail and he's just falling apart.
During the
Yeah.
chase scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you play Until Dawn?
Yeah, I did. I liked it.
Okay.
I think it's a good game.
I did too. It's been a long time since I played it. I think I played it back in like 2019, maybe. I didn't realize. Did you see that it got a full Unreal Engine 5 remaster last year?
Yeah, I saw that. I heard it wasn't very good or like not
It
like
was pretty. It was a pretty good looking game to begin with. Like,
yeah.
that's one of those things where it's like, okay, but all of a sudden the timing of this movie coming out sort of makes a little bit more sense to me. But yeah, so like that's the game in a nutshell. But the movie is not even what I would really call an adaptation of the game. It's more like its own premise that is inspired by the IP of Until Dawn.
Yeah, and, I mentioned this to you coming out of the movie, like, I can envision the studio pitch for this being like, "Oh, this is a game all about choices. So how do we make the most of all of the available choices? It's just show all of the choices by doing a time loop movie." Right?
Yeah,
And so this is a time loop movie in the vein of something like a Happy Death Day, but much less clever and
yeah.
much messier, right? Like one of the charms of Until Dawn is there's a lot of possibilities. Like there's a lot of varied scares based on the choices you make. And rather than like curating in this movie, they kind of just throw everything at the wall.
Yeah, and I would even say that there are, like, sort of taken on their own some interesting and effective sequences in this movie, but the problem is that, like, as a cohesive whole, this thing is just a utterly convoluted mess because it's like its rules are so confused, it's constantly rewriting them, and it's always having to add these things that like people might recognize from the game but sort of divorced of the context of the game, so in that they don't really make sense within the context of the movie other than as a sort of like, snap and point moment. But it's also like, I liked Until Dawn, but who is this for, who's this movie for?
Yeah, when we look for GIF backgrounds for the Patreon video version of this every week, and when I searched Until Dawn, I was surprised at how many like specific shots from the game were recreated in the movie. I think of
Oh,
the
really?
girl, yeah, the girl, around the corner with the Wendigo coming towards her, or
Mm,
there's, the dude in the mask, or, there's a lot of signifiers to the original game, but they're so loose, right?
right.
That, it feels empty. And I feel like that's kind of the theme of a lot of this movie. It just feels empty.
Yeah.
They try so much that it never feels like developed whatsoever. Like you have so many of these characters that I could not care about any of them whatsoever. And like even the premise of having a time loop movie, they do their wink and nod to it, half jokes about like, oh, I've seen movies like this. And it's like there's no cleverness to it beyond that sort of half nod, right?
Right.
Like, I think of something like A Happy Death Day, and they're so clever with that premise where this is just like,
Well, yeah, it feels like the Happy Death Day is like trying a bunch of, clever ideas, and it's not sort of tied down by IP, I guess. Like, that's what this movie feels like. They knew that they couldn't just make a direct adaptation of the game because what's the point? Those games are based, like I said, they're choose your own adventure movies. They're extremely cinematic. So what is the point of taking that and just making a one-to-one adaptation except you're robbing somebody of the charm of the game, which is the player agency, right? But otherwise it just feels like, this is a game that like some people liked, so we can, yeah, fuck it, we can turn this into something. It's a title that people recognize and it might get them out to the theater, but because of that they have to take a totally different story and just sort of like constantly pepper it with things from the game but divorced of the game's context.
yeah, it's such a shame. The game was co-written by Larry Fessenden, who is kind of a indie horror kind of legend in his own right. He's made a lot of great indie horror movies and acted in a lot of great indie
Hmm.
horror movies. he didn't even get an adaptation writing credit on this.
Well, because they're not adapting his story at all. They're
Yeah,
not
that's what I was
adapting his
gonna say.
script.
I on one hand, I'm kind of annoyed at that because I think, you should get credit regardless, but at the same time, like, it's so loose in, like, taking, the inspiration from the game that it's barely the same thing.
Well, yeah, and instead of getting, a Larry Fessenden story on this, we've got a movie directed by David F. Sandberg of
Yeah,
Lights Out and Annabelle Creation
and
fame.
the Shazam movies,
Oh, yeah, and Shazam.
which have aged very well, like a fine milk.
I think he only did the first Shazam, but
No, he did both of them.
did he?
Yeah,
Um, but this was written by fucking Gary Dauberman, who has also worked with David Sandberg in the past, who wrote a couple of the Annabelle movies, The Nun 2, and my least favorite movie of last year, the Salem's Lot remake. So yeah, I mean, what can you really expect going into this?
yeah.
And I did go in with pretty low expectations, so I can't say that I was disappointed, but I was bored and frustrated for the hour 45 that this
Yeah.
movie runs.
Yeah, I was pretty unbelievably bored during most of this
Yeah,
movie, which is a shame because they do throw a handful of fun practical effects in
yeah.
there.
Like I said, like taken completely, just like individually, there are a few good sequences, but they just don't mesh together into a greater whole that I feel like is worthwhile. And again, it's just like, who is this movie for? Like, does Until Dawn even have shooters like that? Like, does it have like fans who are like, I gotta get out and see this movie? It has like a 5 out of 10 rating on IGN, like I will say it's pretty weird and funny to sit down for a movie and before the movie starts have the PlayStation Studios like bumper pop up before before the movie starts. It's like,
See fucking Astrobot in your movie theater.
yeah, it's kind of nice to be sitting in the theater and get to see all of my friends like Kratos and Nathan Drake and Joel Last of Us, jump up on the screen before the movie starts.
Yeah. What I really was hoping for when this was announced, I was really hoping they would lean into the choose your own adventure stuff, go bold and inventive with it. I feel like we haven't ever gotten a true like choose your own adventure thing in a movie theater. I did hear that in the 90s there was one. I only know of this because I was watching old Siskel and Ebert clips, and in one of their worst of the year lists, they talk about this movie with an interactive gimmick where you chose between one of like three options, and it was like a 30-minute movie that would play twice, and you could see different outcomes, of course, and it was all like how to kill your boss and stuff like that. And I was hoping for something like that because like something like Bandersnatch, for example, where like you choose your own adventure and it kind of, gives you variations based on what you see is super fun. But Bandersnatch is on Netflix, right? You're
Right.
watching that by yourself or maybe with a couple people. The idea of being able to be in a theater and vote with an audience on what you'd like to see would be really cool. And I don't think we've seen it before. And unfortunately, we don't see it here, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of two minds on that kind of thing. Like I am in general very opposed to people being on their phones during movies, and there's no way to do a choose your own adventure movie in theaters without people. Like you'd have to do it like Jackbox style, where when the movie starts, there's like a room code or whatever that everybody like puts in on a website. But at the same time, this movie otherwise is so fucking stupid and uninteresting that like if I went into this movie knowing that there was that gimmick, it's like, okay, let me get out my phone and I'm gonna be like voting on the actions of the characters, like with all of the other people in the audience, like throughout this. Like I think if you go into it like knowing that that's a kind of like curated experience, then it could be interesting. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I think a gimmick like that would get people in theaters. And like, I agree with you on the phone thing. What they used to do in the 90s when they did it is they gave you a little 3-button
a
little
little
controller,
buzzer,
and
that would
like
be preferable.
they would never do that nowadays because that costs money,
Right,
right?
you have to
And they
manufacture those things.
I think it would be worth it, and I think that investment would pay off for something like this. Where, like,
Yeah,
this, because it's a half-hearted adaptation of something all about choice where it robs you of choice, no one's caring.
it doesn't even really provide the characters with choice either, though. Like, that's the thing. It's like the gimmick is that they're like trapped in this like town or house or whatever, where if they survive until dawn they escape, otherwise if they die they come back, and then the next night something else is trying to kill them, and the more times they die they're slowly turning into wendigos for some reason, because it's in the game. But like, they don't even really make it a matter of the characters being confronted with choices and being like, okay, well, I choose to do this and that gets me killed, so next time I'm going to choose to do something else. It's kind of just like, all right, here's a new, they're just alive again, and they run
Yeah.
around for a little bit, and then maybe something new shows up to kill them, or maybe it's just one of the things that we've seen kill them before. Fuck you, it doesn't matter, who cares?
I mean, one of the most pathetic recurring things for me is the characters would make a bold decision and things would go wrong. And instead of trying their best to survive and continue and seeing like that played out in full, they would be like, oh, hey, let's just kill ourselves and start over. It's like they're just save scumming real
Right.
life. Like,
Yeah, but oh, there's some tension there, because if they don't know how many nights they have, they know it's not unlimited, because nobody else who's been trapped in this place has had unlimited nights, because eventually you turn into a Wendigo again for some reason, because it's in the game. Like,
yeah, it's a ticking clock that's there, but it's so half-baked again
yes,
because, like, they don't really care about the ticking clock until the very end.
what are the rules? What are the rules? Like, and I say that rhetorically, because the movie spends plenty of time telling you what the rules are, but the rules are always changing, and there's so many different rule sets that don't like mesh together, that instead of there actually being like well defined rules, it's just kind of like, ah, whatever, fuck you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can start with characters a little bit if we're, kind of combing through stuff.
Yawn, yawn.
It's hard to even talk at length about these characters because they're so interchangeable and unmemorable. Like, I know Odessa Azion, who was in that Hellraiser movie a couple years ago, is in this.
Yeah,
She
forgot about
was
that.
she was okay. Again, unmemorable though, like kind of
Yeah,
wasted.
I don't think any of the actors in this movie are particularly bad, but they're just not working with an interesting script at all.
Yeah.
Like, the characters aren't really there. And another like frustrating thing about this movie is that it really evokes, in a lot of ways, Cabin in the Woods.
Mhm.
We were talking about this a little bit on the drive back, and like Cabin in the Woods is a much more interesting movie that is simultaneously a love letter to horror as a genre, but also sort of like satirizing its common tropes and archetypes and stuff like that in, a pretty clever way, I think. And it has a very similar setup to this, because it's a comment on the classic, horror cabin in the woods setup. a group of young friends are on a road trip. They end up stranded in this weird place. They find some spooky artifacts or items or whatever, and then they're menaced by, a monster or a ghost or a serial killer or whatever. And this movie is that exactly. It's the exact same setup, but while Cabin in the Woods is sort of doing this, play on the archetypical horror like characters that all of these characters represent like a specific archetype, like the slut, the athlete,
The stoner.
the stoner, the virgin, all of that. Like it's like explicitly commenting on these things. And this movie is basically just taking those same trappings and sort of being like, ooh, yeah, what if it was like a cabin in the woods kind of scenario where there's like a different monster every night? But it's also not, but it's not saying anything, like it's
Yeah.
not serving as like a satire or anything. And the characters just are kind of archetypes again.
Yeah, it's very unclever about it all, and, like, Cabin in the Woods is a good movie, and it's crazy to say this, but, written by Joss Whedon, and I gotta say, I'd much rather take Whedon soy bants than this unseasoned chicken breast of a script.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking bad. And again, like I think for what they're working with, all of the actors like here do their jobs pretty well. I just don't
Mhm.
care about the characters and they're not like super developed. Um
What's kinda surprising to me is, the games have, Rami Malek and Hayden Panettiere, and they're not, like, A-list celebs, but they're notable names, like,
well,
you'd think
Rami Malek is definitely too big for a movie like this now.
I
He
mean, at this
wasn't
point, yes.
Yeah, he wasn't when the game came out in 2015, but he's won an Oscar since then. An Oscar
Yeah,
for a terrible movie, but he has won an Oscar. So like he has absolutely like reached the point of being too high caliber for a movie like this.
sure, but it's baffling to me that they didn't pull a big name generally to pull people into the theaters. Like, they're banking entirely on name recognition of the game and not any actors in it. Like, you have Peter Stormare, of course, but he's a character actor. Like, he's not
Right.
someone that'll get butts in seats.
He was in the game though.
He was, yeah.
Although they really do something weird with his character in this movie. I mean, I guess we could talk about that. Like, I don't really care too much about like getting into the nitty gritty of this movie. And
No, I mean, it's so bland.
if you really give a shit about spoilers for Until Dawn, then go see it, I guess. Um,
Play the
but
game instead.
Yeah, play the game instead. But yeah, okay, so Pierce Stormare is the probably most recognizable name in this movie, which is not saying a ton. Um, but no, I mean I like him as a character actor, and he was in the game. The game had, and it's been a long time since I've played it, so I don't totally remember how this worked out, but there's sort of like a framing narrative where the chapters are sort of like bookended by you, the player, being psychoanalyzed in like
Mhm.
an office by a psychiatrist played by Peter Stormare. And he would kind of like, ask you questions and like present you with like, of these three objects, like which one scares you the most or whatever. And like the things that you choose there would have some type of effect on the narrative of the like the inner narrative.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah, and it kind of expands on the idea of the butterfly effect, right? Like that's the whole cornerstone of the game really is you make decisions that, kind of have domino effects.
right. Right. And so they do have Peter Stormare in this movie. I almost said in this game. In this movie, playing the same character that as he plays in the game, like the psychiatrist, but instead of acting as this sort of like meta framing device, they have him as like the primary antagonist in the movie, where he's like a mad scientist who is performing experiments in this town that was cursed by a witch because a coal mine disaster happened.
And the town got half buried and
This is unclear. What are the rules? But so they have Peter Stormare kind of like you know lurching around this movie as like a puppet master, mad scientist kind of guy. But just like so many other things in this movie, that it feels so much like a remember this guy from the game? Here he is being something different than he was in the game. Why not? Fuck you. You know? It's like there is no purpose, despite his character being the primary antagonist of the movie. There is no reason for his character to exist.
Yeah,
The
it's bizarre.
entire
I mean, like, you'd think his character would serve as Mr. Exposition, and he
which
does
he
give a little
does.
bit of exposition, but, like, you could completely remove his character, and the movie would be the exact same.
Yes, exactly. In fact, when this was announced, he was basically top billed because he's the most recognizable name in this movie. And he's introduced in the movie as what Cabin in the Woods calls the Harbinger character, where in, classic horror fashion, they stop at an old rundown gas station, and the creepy guy behind the counter tells them, like, oh, people go missing up that road, like just that very stock archetypical horror character. And I thought that was like the extent of Peter Stormare's involvement in this movie. That like the three lines he has in that gas station, I'm like, oh wow, so they're really just moving on from him, huh? And then he shows up later, I'm like, oh, what are we doing here? But I also like that implies for his character that when he's not doing his mad scientist experiments in the town, he's dressed up like a hillbilly running the gas station up the road, like trying to lure people in. Yeah.
His daytime moonlighting job.
It's so fucking funny because like he's dressed like a very sort of typical Appalachian redneck style, like dirty shirt, flannel, like trucker hat, but he's just not disguising his accent at all. So so you've got this guy who looks like an American hillbilly, but he's talking with like a very thick, like Swedish accent. It's like, what's going on here?
I wonder if he tried to do an accent and just bailed quickly, or if he was just like, "No, this is the character."
Yeah, I mean, I think he's using his real accent in the game. I can't remember for sure. So like, oh, well, it's the same character, so he's gotta, just. But I can also see like
Yeah,
Peter
but you'd
Stormare
think
coming
in
into
the gas station, even character motivation would be like,
right that he
feign
would
an accent.
that he should like yeah that he should like feign some type of accent. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those lazy things. Like I can
Yeah,
absolutely see Peter Stormare coming into this movie and being like, I'm not doing any character work. What are you talking about for this?
yeah. I mean, in fairness, probably my favorite part of the movie still, even though he is such a nothing burger of a character. I
Yeah,
did like his presence on screen more than basically any other character.
I always enjoy his on-screen presence. He plays a great villain, but just like all the other characters, he's not working with much here, so I don't even feel like he's really able to chew the scenery like I would like. And his sort of his villain's monologue at the end of the movie is one of the most frustrating parts of the film for me. So that really sort of like sours his overall presence in the film, I think, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But god damn, them trying, like them having him show up at the end to give a bunch of exposition to try to make all of the pieces fit together.
It was bad, and the fact that, earlier in the film, it's established that he knows the stuff about the tap water, which we can get into later. But he knows that, and still he's very nonchalant about the water being so close to his mug on his desk.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So yeah, we I don't even know, man. I don't even know
That probably makes no sense to
what
anyone
thread.
without context.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the best way to explain all of that, cuz there's okay, so going way back, our primary protagonist in this group is sad
Clover.
because her Clover, yes, maybe the only character whose name I remember because they say it a million times in the movie. So yes, we've got our protagonist Clover, who's sad because a year prior to this, her sister went missing. And so, because of this, she and her friends, in an attempt to give her closure, are taking a road trip following the last known whereabouts of the sister. Like they're not like looking for her, but and it doesn't matter. I'm
They're
getting
sort
lost.
of retracing her steps
They're
to the
retracing
best
her
of their
steps.
ability.
Yes. So this leads them to the this town, or this old house that's a welcome center for a town that, when Peter Stormare said the name of the town the first time, I thought, surely I misunderstood what he said. Surely the town isn't called Glore Valley. that can't, that can't be that can't be right. The town is called Glore Valley.
Glore Valley.
But it
No.
is, lo and behold. So they end up at the welcome center to Glore Valley, which is where the spooky events start happening or whatever. But so the whole thing is kind of driven by Clover, like trying to figure out what happened to her sister. She's like, "Oh, my sister came this way," and Peter Stormare very sinisterly in the gas station is like, "A lot of people disappear in Glore Valley." So she's like, "Oh, well, my sister disappeared around here, so let's go investigate." So, but anyway, this whole driving thing is like she's carrying this baggage about her sister, and then jumping back to the very end of the movie, when Peter Stormare's monologuing, he's talking about how her trauma is the engine that like runs the curse on Glore Valley. Why? I don't know. Because there was a mining act, like the mine collapsed in like 20 years before, and the town like mostly sank into like a big sinkhole, and like 11,000 people died or something. So it's a place that, but it was also cursed by a witch, maybe. That's unclear as
Maybe?
well. Maybe, but Peter Stormare's like, it's a so you take a place that has experienced a great trauma, and you put a person in it who's experienced a great trauma, and then the trauma feeds the trauma and becomes terror.
Terror trauma.
Terror trauma. Again, this is all very unclear. I can't express enough how unclear all of these things are. But so he's basically saying that like even though there are certain constants for everybody who like comes here, like the masked killer and like the Wendigos running around, that like the other stuff that happens is like a manifestation of the traumatized person's fears,
Yeah.
something. And this is all a roundabout way to get us to the fact that for some reason, one of her fears makes it so that if you drink the water in this place, you just blow up.
Yeah, she's scared of tap water.
I guess she's really scared of tap water because if you
They're
drink
putting
it,
chemicals in the water.
they're putting fluoride, they're putting chemicals in the water, they're exploding the frickin' Zoomers. Because of woke, because of trans, maybe. Who knows?
Answer that, Sony. Well, I will say the water bit does lead to maybe the best set piece of the movie, and that's when they're all holed up in the bathroom
Yes,
and
I did. I
you
did
know,
enjoy this scene. I thought this was pretty fun. This is
yeah,
on like
they
their third or fourth night, and they're like, "Let's just stay in the bathroom and just try to like stay alive."
yeah, and they all hold up in the bathroom and one of them turns on the water and it of course comes out brown and gross at first, but it clears up after time. They get a drink of water from it and pass it around. Everyone else takes a sip of the water. One of them starts coughing wildly and they're a bit concerned, and then out of nowhere he just explodes.
Yeah.
Feels very end of Ready or Not.
Yeah, or like the boys, like the
Mhm.
characters, but it makes everybody's head explode. Yeah, I mean those are good effects too. Like
Mhm.
the body explosions look good. And at that point they sort of like one after another they all explode. One of them, it's like way worse and weirder for some reason with the psychic girl, because like first like her leg blows up and then like her belly swells up like she's pregnant, and then that pops, and then just her head explodes.
Yeah, I didn't
Everybody
really
else,
get that.
no, I mean, it felt like an excuse to have like a sort of like more prolonged like body horror moment.
Yeah.
Um, because if there's one thing this movie is doing, it's just sort of whereas I think really a good way to sum it up is like, whereas Cabin in the Woods is sort of like commenting on and satirizing horror as a genre, this movie is just quoting horror as a genre. Like it uses a lot of like very tropey kind of cliche visuals and set pieces and stuff that you recognize from any number of horror movies that you've seen, but it's not actually saying anything about them. It's just kind of like, here's this. Oh, we need something spooky to happen. Here's a chair that's rocking on its own. Oh, now there's a clown doll in it. Why? Who cares? Fuck you. That's why clowns are scary, right? And the movie's full of this. And it's like, oh, it's all being created by Clover's trauma or whatever. Who cares? Who care? I don't care. It's boring. More like Until Yawn.
Oh, you got him. That's so true. Like, I again, because she has so many different fears that are ill-defined, it just feels messy. It feels like they're throwing everything at the wall, and it feels like none of the specific scares are particularly thought out or clever or deep, right? Like, I think
Right.
if you just picked a couple, you could go way further with it. Like, I think the closest we get to that is the stuff with the Wendigos, right? Because obviously they pull that from the original game. So I feel like out of everything, that kind of gets the most shine.
That and the masked killer, because again that's
Mhm.
also something that's pulled from the game, which I think is actually kind of a fun subversion in the game itself. Like, and I guess spoilers for a 10-year-old game, whatever. It's fun, play it. but like it sort of like starts out as like a what you expect to be like a slasher thing where there is like this masked killer walking around, but then like it's kind of revealed over time that like, oh no, there's actually a supernatural element, and the slasher thing is kind of like a red herring, and there's actually, you know, these wendigos, that curse was started from some miners who got trapped in a cave in and had to eat each other, so you know that kick started the curse, like stuff that makes sense and like a little bit more like narrowly scoped, like tighter kind of
Yeah.
story. But it's like that stuff gets the most screen time in this movie because it feels like, because they're sort of like ripping it from the game, so it's the most defined. But then all of the other stuff I think is actually like conceptually more interesting, but doesn't actually fit into the movie in a way that makes sense. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, 100%. The most egregious example to me of that is at one point late in the movie, they aren't sure how many days have passed. So one of them pulls out their phone and realizes they've been recording video of a bunch of the days. And
Right.
so it kind of turns into this montage of found footage horror. And like each sequence is only like a minute, 2 minutes tops, but they're super compelling, and I feel like that sequence on its own, not attached to the rest of the movie, was really cool. There was a lot of
Right.
cool stuff there. It's just like, it had no context really for the rest of the movie.
Totally. And another thing that was kind of frustrating about that scene is like I get it as a device for them to, you know, essentially do this little found footage sequence where they can showcase some cool concepts. But also like I was really sort of hoping that it would be, because they're sort of like, ah man, I can remember some stuff, but I can't remember other stuff, and that's what prompts one of the characters to check his phone. I thought it would have been cool if it was them like recording videos to themselves being like, hey, we've tried this, don't do this one, like don't go to this place, try going here instead. That they're like essentially like leaving themselves notes for like the next night. That would be really interesting.
Mhm.
They don't do that at all. Another example of something that I think is like conceptually interesting but totally like jarringly out of place in the movie is at one point two of the characters try to leave to go get help, and you know you expect it's of course going to be one of those things where it's like, well, they can't leave for whatever supernatural reason. There's a kind of cool thing they do where like on the border of the town, like the rain just stops, like they're driving in a big storm and they drive through it, and it's like the rain is continuing behind them, but like within the town the sky is clear, so that sort of demarcates like the border, right? And so I just figured like they're just not going to be able to pass that border. They do, they walk through and they come out the other side somewhere. But two characters get in the car and they drive out, and then there's a big giant out there, and then they get scared and they turn around and drive back in. And that's never addressed ever again.
No, it looks cool.
It's
I'll give
cool.
them that much.
The visual of like the big shape with like the glowing eyes sort of like looming out of the rain and fog above them is a compelling image. It's cool. But they just turn around and drive back. We never see that giant again. It's nobody ever never mentions it. It's just like, okay, we can't leave because there's a giant out there. Why? Fuck you. Who cares? That is the I keep coming back to that because it is the fucking motto of this movie is fuck you, who cares? And the writers obviously didn't care, so I don't know how they can expect me as the viewer to care about it if you're not going to put some fucking god, just like basic plot structure into your fucking script.
It's clear to me that no one involved really gave a shit about.
Cuz why would you? This movie is a classic cash grab attempt. There is no artistic reason for making this movie.
Yeah.
Not one. This is an attempt to make some quick, easy money with a low budget adaptation of a IP that they own the license to. That's it. That's it.
Again, yeah, I think the crazy thing is, like, you can pull up, like, a full playthrough of Until Dawn on YouTube, right? And watch through that, you know? It's probably, like, 30 to 60 minutes longer than this movie, or at least it felt like that. Um, but, like, you're getting a similar experience, but honestly, told much better, right? Like, I think if
Yeah.
you're just watching a single playthrough of Until Dawn passively, like, you're gonna have a better experience than you are watching this film. And I think that that says a lot about kind of the approach to storytelling generally, in that, like, even if you strip out the idea of choice, like, I think
Yeah.
the foundation of what the game is still much better than what we got here.
An example of something that I'm starting to notice more and more, like very recently, where studios are trying to trick people into thinking that their movies are like more elevated than they are in advertisement. Like the biggest example that I think maybe people might have seen is like the trailer for the new Thunderbolts movie or whatever, the Marvel one, right? Like where they released a trailer where it's basically like in between shots of the film they do splash cards of like starring the cast of movies such as, and then they list a bunch of like A24 movies, like stuff like Midsummer, like stuff that Florence Pugh has been in and stuff like that, and then like from the cinematographer of Hereditary, you know, blah 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 blah, from the composer of such and such, just like throwing all of these indie movies up on the screen to try to be like, hey, this Marvel slop, it's not like all the other Marvel slop. A bunch of people who've worked on critically acclaimed independent films and more artsy studio films have worked on this one. So, you know, that's why you should come see it. And Until Dawn did a similar trailer. I don't know if you saw it. I think I told you about it. I caught it on Hulu when I was watching some shit on TV a couple of weeks ago. And there's a trailer for Until Dawn where it's like, this is a true horror lover's film. Every night is a love letter to a different genre. And they'll do like slasher, and you see like the killer with his big axe running around. They'll be like, demonic possession, and they do the thing where like the psychic girl is like hovering, it's like body horror, and it's the shot of like the girl with her stomach expanding or whatever. So they're trying to be like, hey, you horror nerds out there, like, look, all of the horror stuff you love, like, all this is a love letter to the genre, you know, this isn't just some cheap IP slop cash grab. We're writing a love letter to horror. And
Yeah.
this shit really fucking pisses me off. I do not like I know it's maybe kind of stupid to be mad at advertisement for being dishonest, but like this kind of shit really really rubs me wrong because it I can tell that they're cynically trying to target me specifically, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't envy the marketers, in fairness. Like, you have your job is to polish a turd to make it
Right.
seem like it's good. And some of that is, you know, leaning into stuff that is not emphasized as much in the actual film, which is not great for the audience either.
And also it's just like, okay, like maybe you can lure people to the theater with that kind of stuff. Like, okay, you have gotten their butt in a seat, so you've made a little bit of money off of them. But like, do you not think that those people are going to be pissed when they realize that they've been lied to? Like, do you think that somebody who sees that trailer is like, "Ooh, a love letter to the horror genre," is gonna go and sit down and watch this movie and not recognize it for what it is?
I
Like,
mean,
do
I
you
think
think
the terrible thing, and this is indicative of, like, the state of bigger budget movies in general, is like they don't care. right? They got your money once. They're not expecting you to go back, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
once they have your money, they have your money. And I think something like Sinners shows that that doesn't have to be the way. Like Sinners had like historically the lowest drop in, first to second weekend sales
Yeah.
ever for an R-rated movie. And I think that's because people actually enjoyed it and they appreciated the passion being put into it. And like I think for a movie like this where it's completely devoid of passion, how do you get someone to care about it, to spread it word of mouth or like go
Right.
back? I don't
Yeah.
think anyone's going to go back to see this movie and they shouldn't.
No. No, definitely not. And at a certain point, it maybe feels like a bit of a sort of like tired exercise to even like give a movie like this much thought. And I don't think I would if we didn't have to talk about it on the
Yeah.
podcast. But also, it's like I don't know. I think every now and then it's it can be useful to take a look at something that is like a clear example of what's wrong with the industry in general. And I think that like looking at a movie like this so soon after, like you're just talking about Sinners, which despite my own problems with it, like I'm very happy for its success, and I think that it's an example of like good studio decisions. Um and in studio putting their faith and their trust in an artist instead of in charts and numbers, and I think they're being rewarded for it. So it's interesting in comparison, just be like the studio really took a chance with Sinners, and this is a total like safe, like playing it safe. Like I don't know what the budget for this movie is. I can't imagine that it's very high. Like maybe it will make its budget back, maybe it'll just squeak that out, but even if it
Yeah.
doesn't, like it doesn't cost enough to be like they'll make their money back licensing it to so and so streaming service at some point.
I mean, what's interesting to me is this isn't Sony Interactive's first foray into making movie adaptations. Almost 10 years ago now, they tried to make an adaptation. Well, they did make an adaptation of Ratchet and Clank. It's a CG movie, which came out and totally bombed. No one
I don't
even
even remember
remembers that
that.
that existed. I feel like this again is a total sputtering start, right? Like they have a lot of good stuff they could work with. They have a lot of good material to mine from, but like you have to have passion to make something good regardless. Like no one's going to care if you don't care yourself. And like I think that's a common story with executives at any company really, right? Like they don't know what they have in their hands and they don't care and don't have the curiosity to learn more and find out, right? Like I think if they had a better understanding of the material here, you could find an avenue for someone to be really passionate about this. But, like, again, I envision in my mind the studio meeting of this where it's like they hear the pitch, they see the baseline connections in the Google PowerPoint that there is, and they're like, "Okay, we'll give you $10,000,000." And that's all the thought it got.
And it's so low risk for them. Like horror is low budget horror is almost always a way for a studio to make some very easy money, or at the very least not take a loss. Like okay, I did find the budget for this movie is estimated $15 million, which sounds about right. And I won't spoil the like specific numbers because we'll have it for prediction results next week. But worldwide, it did make its money back opening weekend. So that's all that matters to them, right? It's like they're not losing anything on a dog shit movie like this. Like it essentially accomplished what they needed it to. If the IP has enough name recognition to pull the amount of people out to go see it in the theater, make a little bit of money, whatever, who cares? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
This and it will be consigned to the dustbin of cinema history. We will not remember this movie at the end of the year when it inevitably ends up in at least one of our bottom five.
It does make me wonder, like, they did announce a movie adaptation of Horizon, which I'm sure is gonna have a much bigger budget, but, like, if they aren't giving it passion, like,
Oh,
that's
I
gonna
think that'll
fucking
suck.
bomb too.
I think that'll
Yeah.
stink, dude. Yeah. I don't see how you adapt that game well anyway. It'll just be a CG slop fest. It'll be fucking gross.
I mean, what's interesting is I feel like we're in an era of Marvel superhero stuff is, at a low point or a lull almost. And in its wake, we're getting a slew of video game adaptations, right? And successful video game adaptations. You know, Super Mario Bros. And Minecraft and Sonic.
And The Last of Us TV show has been very successful. So
Yeah.
Sony too is
Mhm.
sort of like on that shit right now.
But as we get more and more of them, I think the quality control is gonna keep going lower. And I mean, I would argue that that's the same exact trend we saw with superheroes, right? Like the bar
Sure.
just got lowered and lowered and lowered, where by the end of it, it was just pure slop.
And I think the ceiling for this stuff is much lower than the MCU anyway, because like with superheroes stuff, like at least there's a huge sort of connected history of source material to pull from and play with. Whereas like games, that's to a lesser degree. Most games are standalone or they're limited to a series or whatever. There's not as much opportunity for the crossover events that the studios like. And hey, I'm not complaining about this and do not want fucking I don't want a Super Smash Brothers movie. But
Oh,
also
we'll
I
get
think
it.
that
That'll be the Avengers of 5 years from now. I'm
sure.
calling it now.
But also I think that some of the video game movie success stuff is artificially inflated. Like maybe not artificially inflated, but like the ones that are really successful are for kids, right?
Yeah.
Is like Marvel and Minecraft and stuff that like doesn't have to be good in order to please its target audience. You know what I mean? Like we saw Mario. I thought it was fine. The animation was really good. But I don't care to ever see it again. I'm certainly not going to go see Minecraft. But it's like that target audience is like their kids will always be interested in this stuff, but I don't think there's as high of a ceiling for it as for Marvel, which is ultimately pandering to man children instead of like children. And again, like kids don't care about quality. Like you can do your Minecraft, you can do your Super Mario, but on top of that, like most other video game adaptations still fucking suck. Like they've managed some success with The Last of Us, but again, it's just because they're fucking directly adapting an already very cinematic game, doing lots of shots one to one. Just like that seems like low hanging fruit to me, with such like a built-in like devoted audience too. But hey, I guess we'll see. Do you think this movie's going to get a sequel? They did set up for a potential sequel at the very
No,
end.
dude. Fuck
I don't
no.
think See, I don't think so either, but as I've already said, like internationally it's already made its money back after opening weekend. So it's technically a box office success.
I mean, in fairness, we don't really have an official Until Dawn 2. We have a lot of different stories, and I think if they go with that route, you could totally do it. Do a different story in the Dark Pictures anthology or whatever.
Yeah. Well,
But
to sort of clarify for our listeners, like potential sequel setup they do at the very end is after everybody makes it out, blah blah blah. They kill Pierce Stormare. She puts water in his coffee, so he explodes. Who cares? Um, at the very end, we see like his bank of televisions that he was like monitoring them on, and all of the TVs one by one they change from seeing like the town where we'd seen before to like a cabin like in the mountains with like snow, and like a car pulls up outside, which is incidentally the setting of the game is in like a cabin in the mountains in the snow. So yeah, I don't know, like how would they where would they go with a sequel to this narratively, because they've cashed out their use of masked killers and wendigos. So how would they create a follow up?
Yeah, I mean, my answer would be the same as the producer's answers and Gary Doberman's answer, most likely, is who cares?
Who cares? Fuck you.
Yeah. I have two last things before
Okay.
we close out. One, I do want to mention the cinematography in this movie because I found a lot of it really dark and ugly,
Yep.
continuing the trend of dark, ugly movies this year. Like, of course, for a game called Until Dawn, it's going to be dark, but like so much of it was kind of hard to see and kind of
Yeah.
aggressively dark in a way that I think was a little counterintuitive and kind of unproductive for what it was going for. The second thing I wanted to mention is what'd you think of our audience today? We had a talkative audience.
Yeah, it was the kind of audience that if I had actually enjoyed the movie, I would have been way more frustrated at. It's your typical like talkative audience of clowns who think that that they're funny. So like making jokes loud enough for the whole audience to hear. But, you know, again, if I was like really trying to focus on the movie and I was like really immersed in it, if we'd had that audience for the Shrouds last week, I would have been furious. Not I can't imagine that audience for the Shrouds, but just to illustrate my point. For this,
There's
whatever.
a type of bad movie where that sort of crowd elevates it, and unfortunately, this movie isn't in that camp, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, no, it definitely didn't elevate the experience, but um and in fairness, or to in fairness to myself, um I did loudly tell the movie to fuck off at one point. I didn't really mean to. It just kind of escaped when during Pierce Stormare's big monologue at the end, and he's talking about like people with trauma or whatever, like she looks down at the desk and he has a bunch of patient case files, and when he talks about the masked killer, there's one with a little picture of Rami Malek in it. And I cannot say this with 100% certainty, but I'm like 85% sure that it wasn't an actual photo of Rami Malek, that it was a photo of his character model from the video game. I think it was.
I mean, honestly, they probably have the usage rights to the character, but not his actual, you know?
His likeness, yeah, his
Yeah.
actual likeness. They would not be able to get him to like pose for a photograph for this movie. So yeah, I'm fairly certain that it's just a picture of his model. But it's just like, yeah, that little Rami Malek cameo is just like, ah. So yeah, I very loudly told the movie to fuck off at that point. Fortunately, I don't think anybody really cared. I don't like to be that kind of disruptive. Oh, I guess the one of the last things that I'll mention. I'm trying to think if I have anything else I really want to touch on, and I don't, because it's all so fucking boring. Um, but way too many jump scares.
Yeah.
Way too many fucking jump scares, especially in the third act. It's almost like they intuited that I would be falling asleep during this movie. So, like, every 2 minutes, there has to be a jump scare. Wake up! Wake up! Wake up! Movie's not
Yeah.
over.
They're cheap, unearned jump scares, and,
super,
you know?
super badly telegraphed. Like, it's just, oh man, just relentless to the point where it's like they're not even like startling anymore because it's just like I think there's one part where she's like running through like the tunnels in the basement or whatever and like trying to evade the Wendigos where there's like 3 jump scares in like a minute. It's
Yeah,
like
it's aggressive.
what are we doing here? Like a good jump scare is designed to like elicit a reaction when like a viewer is like at the height of a tense moment. It's like the breaking of tension or when they're completely off guard, when they're totally caught off guard, you know? And it's like when you're just like the cadence of jump scares, you're accomplishing neither. Not tension and I'm not off guard. So it's like what yeah. Um
I was hopeful at the very beginning of this movie because the score kinda sounded like a what's his name? Saxophone guy. Oh,
Colin Stetson. Colin
yeah, it
Stetson.
sounded kinda like Colin Stetson covering, Philip Glass.
I was actually also thinking like right at the very beginning too. I was like, man, if this turns out to be a Colin Stetson score, I'm gonna be disappointed in Colin Stetson. Um, No, I mean the composer is I mean he's noteworthy. It's Benjamin Wallfish who did the score for Blade Runner 2049 with Hans Zimmer. Um and he did the score for like the Invisible Man, the Invisible Man remake. So like he's done some good scores.
Yeah.
Um that's funny that you also thought it might be Colin Stetson at the beginning too, because it was to the point where when the movie started, I almost leaned over to you and was like, "Is this going to turn out to be a Colin Stetson score?" Okay, are we ready to rate? Do you have anything else? I feel like we've done very little talking about the actual movie, but
Whatever,
there's not,
man.
yeah,
Fuck it.
there's not a whole lot to talk about. Um, Yeah, I'm feeling like a 1.5 out of 5 on this, I think. It's pretty bad. Like, it's not unwatchable, but I was certainly fidgeting a lot. Like, I was restless in this movie. Did not have a good time.
Yeah, I was bouncing between a 1 and a 1.5 as well. I'm gonna go with the 1.5 too. I will say, one of the marketing things for this movie is they did an Until Dawn challenge, right? Where
Oh,
some
God.
selected theaters would, show Until Dawn over and over again, um, literally until dawn. And if you went to one of those screenings, you had to stay in your seat and you couldn't fall asleep and you couldn't leave the theater at any point. And if you did, I think you get some sort of reward.
Yeah, I
Um,
think I saw something about that. Like, you can win, like, free movie tickets for a year or something like that. Which, I mean, not a bad prize, but especially after sitting through one screening of this, like,
I see why it's a challenge, right?
yeah. And kind of an insurmountable one. I don't think I'd be able to do it.
I
Like,
would fall asleep in like the second screening, I think.
bro, I was almost falling asleep multiple times
Likewise, yeah.
during one screening of this movie in the middle of
Yeah,
the afternoon, dude. Like,
yeah,
it's not like we caught a late night screening.
yeah.
It's almost 2 hours. So if you were gonna watch this all night, you're talking like 6 screenings, probably somewhere around there. Like, no, thank you. Kill me.
Yeah, pass. Hard pass.
Well, from the two of us, it's a unanimous 1.5 out of 5 for Until Dawn. I certainly don't expect that if Cleveland had joined us for this one, that he would have been the dissenting voice here. Although, would be extremely funny one for him to like really, really love. He continues his streak of 5-star ratings. It's like, boys, I gotta give Until Dawn a 5. Um, yeah, no, I mean this one is firmly a skip it. I don't think it's worth watching, even if you're a fan of the game. Just play the game. Yeah, well, next week we're going back to the theater. Hopefully Cleve will be back with us, but we're gonna be going to see Clown in a Cornfield, which Might be good. We'll see.
You've read the book.
I
I
have read the
think you're the
book.
most prepared.
I'm the most, yeah, maybe. It's been a couple years. I don't remember the book super clearly, but yeah, I at least sort of know what to expect in terms of the story and the twists, I guess. But I mean, it's directed by the Tucker and Dale versus Evil
Yeah.
people. I don't even know who directed that, but I know a lot of
Eli
people.
Craig, I think is his name.
Oh, Eli Craig. Okay, I do know him actually. Yeah. So I don't know. The trailers look fine. So we'll see. Yeah. Join us next week for our review of Clown in a Cornfield. Um, until then, well, we should address that we have forgotten to do prediction results the last couple of weeks, but we do like to do those when Cleveland is with us, so he can stay up to date on those results. So we'll just
We'll do a
hopefully he'll be back.
roundup bonanza.
Yeah, hopefully next week he'll be back so we can do a roundup of prediction results for Sinners, The Shrouds, and Until Dawn. But that'll be fun. Somebody will be gaining a lot of points all at once probably. Um but yeah, until then, if you like the show and you want to support us, leave us a rating and a review wherever you're listening to this. That is the cheapest and easiest way to help support the show. But hey, if you want to go the extra mile and you want some special stuff, then head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. Shout out to our honorary pod boys, as always, Sam, Zach, Micah, and Mitchell. Y'all are the goats, and we appreciate you. And yeah, you can also, of course, follow us on Letterboxd at Pod People Podcast, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about in the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. I guess my recommendation for the week, I already kind of soft recommended the game, but I'll recommend Cabin in the Woods, which is a movie that I'm kind of surprised we haven't covered at this point on the show, and I would like to at some point. But until then, I think it's worthwhile. It's a fun, and all the Josh Whedonisms aside, it's a fun, clever, creative sort of spin on horror tropes and archetypes and stuff like that. It's a good time.
Yeah. I haven't revisited it since I think it was in theaters. I saw it a couple times when it was in theaters, but I haven't seen it since. I'm looking forward to revisiting it
We
at some
watched
point
it.
in the
Yeah,
near
we
future.
watched it in one of our college classes in
Oh yeah, I
our
guess
our
we did.
horror,
Okay.
yeah, our
Well, it's
horror
still
class.
been about 10 years, so
Still, yeah.
um yeah, so my recommendation this week, I guess, yeah, I'll recommend this show The Studio on Apple Plus, starring Seth Rogen and Ike Barinholtz and Catherine Hahn. I don't know. But it's a super funny sort of sketch style show about the movie industry. It has a lot of notable names in it. In one episode, Martin Scorsese shows up. In another episode, Parker Finn, director of Smile and Smile 2, shows up as they pitch him a movie called Wink about a killer who winks.
Okay,
Um,
that sounds very
yeah,
fun.
it's very silly. Um, a lot of the early marketing materials made it out to be like the sort of like the player sort of thing, like Altman sort of thing, and it's not. It's very silly, but I've been having a blast watching it. It's been really fun. They've done a lot of really elaborate long takes in it for no particular reason, but those are always a blast. So
Oh yeah. Well, I'll need to check that out. That does sound fun. I'd heard some mixed things, but your recommendation is enough for me. All right. Well, I guess that'll do it for us this week. Hopefully our beautiful baby boy will be back with us next week, and the three will be reunited.